All right, we will be going live. Welcome everyone to 2023. This is our first weekly webinar of the year, and we do these just about every week other than holidays or if we're traveling or something like that. And really it's just opportunity to talk about topics that are top of mind or answer questions that have been submitted. So if you ever have questions, feel free to just email them over or reply to the Zoom invitation. And it's just one registration. You're always registered. It's the same link, and you should get an email every week reminding you of the registration. Feel free to just reply to one of those if you do have questions you want submitted ahead of time. And as I'm doing this, if you do have questions, feel free to throw it in the Q&A section. Feel free to throw it in the Q&A section, and then I'll go ahead and answer it. A lot of times I don't have like anything fancy prepared. I've heard comments that like my whiteboard's kind of hard to read. I'm just basically answering questions typically as we go. So bear with me if it doesn't look as professional. I'm just using a whiteboard to kind of draw visuals as I talk. All right. And with that, I always like start with a positive focus, just spending time with family over Christmas and New Year's. Our team worked really hard this year to service our clients, so it was nice to give them a week and some change off. And it was great to spend time with my kids, who are now 12 and 10, and they're growing up so quickly. It's crazy. This was one of the first Christmases where it's like starting to get hard to buy them stuff. Like I remember when they were little, like we'd have a ton of presents and they're all like big, and now they're getting like excited for clothes and things like that. But yeah, it was a good holiday. So that's my positive focus. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. Hit a few buttons here. Hit that and that and that. And now Zoom's making me download something again. All right. And then hit this button and all right. So you should be seeing my screen. Yep. All right. So keep in mind, this is just general advice. If you want to see how this applies to your situation, please schedule some time on our calendar. You can go to a link, which is www.15chris to schedule just a quick phone call to see how any of this applies to your personal information. Okay. All right. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So the first thing, there's two things I wanted to talk about. So the first thing is the new Secure Act. So this passed as part of the spending bill, $1.6/7 trillion spending bill that just passed near the end of the year. One part of it is talking about retirement accounts, and they call the Secure Act 2.0. Secure Act 1.0 was one of the biggest changes in terms of tax law, as well as kind of legacy planning that we've seen in a number of years. That passed at the end of 2019, right before the pandemic hit, and we're doing workshops and webinars on the Secure Act. The two big things that it did is it pushed back the RMD age from 70.5 to 72. This is, again, Secure Act 1.0. And the second thing that it did, and this is the real reason why they passed it, is prior to the Secure Act 1.0, if you inherited an IRA, you could stretch that out over your lifetime, the taxes. But the reason they passed this bill was because there was the federal deficit was at $22 trillion, and there's $26 trillion sitting in these pre-tax accounts. And they knew they couldn't come after your IRAs and 401ks, but they wanted to come after the beneficiaries to make them pay the taxes sooner to help cover the deficit and the debt that the country had. So that was the big thing. So that really changed how we leave IRAs to the next generation. And then also a big tax law change was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that runs from 2018 to 2025 that lowered marginal income tax rates across the board about 3 to 4%. That's going up in 2026. So now we have Secure Act 2.0, which really doesn't do that much in terms of moving the needle in terms of planning. there's a lot to it, and the actual spending bill was about 4,000 pages, and no, I did not read it. What I'm doing is taking some of the research summaries that I've received and just focusing on some of the big things or things that jumped out at me. So if you can ask me some like little provision in there, I might not know it off at the top of my head, because also, again, this just became official, I think, December 29th. So we're just catching up with it. But the big things that really caught my eye is that RMDs, so required minimum distributions, so the age that you're forced to take money out of the IRAs, in 2023, it's now pushed back to 73. So the Secure Act pushed it back from 70.5 to 72. Now Secure Act 2.0 pushes it back to 73. What does this mean? Well, it means that you're not forced to take money out of your traditional IRA or 401k and put it into a taxable account. So the opportunity here is, hey, if you're not already taking RMDs, the opportunity here is, okay, I can engage in another year of an IRA exit strategy where even though I'm not forced to take money out of the IRA, I could do something like a Roth conversion. So it's another year that maybe you look at doing something like a Roth conversion of moving money from your pre-tax account to something that's tax-free. Or if you have a Castle Trust, moving it into the asset protection trust, so it's asset protected. So it gives a little bit of flexibility, but I would make sure that, especially given the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you don't just say, well, you know what, I'm not going to do an RMD this year. Good deal. I'll just leave the money and let it grow inside of that pre-tax account. I'd look at it as another opportunity to take a look at some type of IRA exit strategy, where now you're not forced to take money out of your tax deferred account to put it into a taxable. You could look at maybe putting it into something that's tax-free, like a Roth, or you could look at putting it into like an asset protection trust. So that's probably the one that's going to affect everyone the most. A question that comes in along those lines, I'll be 72 this year. So now with Secure Act 2.0, there's no RMDs, but can I do a qualified charitable distribution? The answer is yes. You don't have to take RMDs to do a QCD. Yeah, there's a comments here. They're looking at pushing back the RMDs to age 75. That's part of the bill as well. All right, so let me knock that down. So again, pushing back the RMDs, really look at that as an opportunity to engage in an IRA exit strategy. It shouldn't be just, okay, I'm going to delay taking RMDs even further. Another interesting thing is miss the RMD penalty, or change the RMD penalty, where now if you forget to take your RMDs, it's reduced from 50% to 25%. Really, that's not that big of a deal. Most people know they have to take RMDs. And then even if you forget, the IRS has been pretty lenient in terms of if you do forget, they'll waive it if there's any type of hardship or anything like that. So not that big of a deal. That's probably not going to affect that many people. And I've seen some analysis saying that it's actually kind of a bad thing, because what it's going to do now is that it's they're going to be less lenient in terms of if you were to forget it. So it seems good, but in reality, it might not be the best option. Okay, next one, Roth 401ks are exempt from RMDs. Okay, that's great. We already had Roth IRAs that were exempt, so it's just making sure that Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs are treated the equal in terms of RMDs. Higher catch-up provisions. So starting in 2025, if you're age 60 to 64, you can do 150% of the catch-up limit. So it's allowing you to put potentially even more money into those retirement accounts. Interesting one. On its face, like I first saw it and I was like, they kind of watered it down a little bit. But if you have a 529 that has to be used for education for, say, a child or a grandchild, and let's say they don't go to college. I was just dealing with this with some clients. where they had a similar situation, but they had a UGMA account that they planned on using for college, and the kid didn't end up going to college. So we're talking about what strategies to do. But a 529 has to be used for education. And the issue was, well, what happens if my kids or my grandkids don't go to college and we don't need that 529? Then I'm potentially penalized taking that money out. Well, now, effective in 2024, you do have the ability to convert that to Roth. Now, there are some kind of rules and regulations. First of all, you have to have the 529 for 15 years. Okay, so it can't be like a relatively new 529. Second, the rollover cannot exceed the annual Roth contribution limit. So each year there's an annual contribution to a Roth limit. I think next year, I don't know off the top of my head, it's probably 6,500 or 7,500 depending on your age. And then the big one is you can't exceed 35,000 during your lifetime. So if you have like $100,000 in a 529 with a thought that a kid or grandkid was going to college and they don't, you can't roll it all out. You can only roll 35,000. And then also, this has actually come up in my practice a little bit. Trying to take money from these pre-tax accounts, it's expanded when you can without paying that 10% penalty if you pull it out prior to 59.5. Probably the most exciting one, or the biggest one that I see that would affect, or I've actually seen, is if clients are terminally ill, allows them to pull that money out. So this isn't like a full dissertation on the Secure Acts. Some of the things are laddered based on the time frame. A big one is the RMDs. So RMDs next year or this year are pushed back for 73, and then it's laddered. I think in 2033 it's pushed back to 75. So some of these things are laddered. We're still kind of dissecting it, but in really from a personal finance, financial planning, kind of legal planning, tax planning, some like little nuanced things, but in reality, the biggest thing is, okay, RMDs are pushed back. Like it's kind of a big whoop type thing. There is an opportunity there with regards to just developing that IRA exit strategy. But the thing that just struck me is that there's not too much meat to the actual Secure Act. But the thing that struck me is that this was part of another 1.65 trillion or $1.7 trillion spending bill, which, again, we've been harping on this for a number of years, is that federal debt, the amount of debt we have as a country is pretty darn scary, because this is on top of the $31 trillion of debt we already have. When the Secure Act 1.0 passed, we were at $22 trillion. So we went from $22 trillion to $31 trillion in about 2 years. And granted, we did have the pandemic, but like both sides are spending money. They were spending money even before this. And now we have another spending bill, and we have almost $850 billion going to defense, another $722 billion going to non-defense things. We have money going to the Ukraine. We have $2.6 billion going to U.S. attorneys. And I don't want to get political, and both sides are spend money. But the big concern for me is just taxes having to go up much higher in the future. We've been blessed over the last 20, 30 years with some of the lowest tax rates across the board. And right now we have probably the lowest we're ever going to have while the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act continues. But just something to think about. So Secure Act 2.0, not that exciting. At least on its face, does push back RMDs further, which does give an opportunity there. But the thing that scares me is it's part of a larger spending bill where we just dropped another $1.65, $1.7 trillion on our debt. And again, both sides are spending, and I'm not trying to get into what they should be spending on. And this isn't all they're spending on. There's some increases to Medicaid and Medicare and things like that, but just something to consider. In terms of your personal planning, if you do have larger IRAs, larger pre-tax 401ks, engaging in that IRA exit strategy may be helpful. All right, let me just see what we have in terms of questions. Okay, all right. Then the other thing I wanted to cover, and I see another question that came in, I'll try to get to that. Just all right, what should we be looking forward to in 2023 in terms of planning? So in terms of legal, financial, tax planning. We like to call this creating your retirement legacy blueprint. We think there's 5 key areas that you need to focus on: income planning, investment planning, tax planning, healthcare planning, and legacy planning. And just think about your personal situation. And if you want to talk about this, feel free to schedule a call. So in terms of income planning, especially if you're in retirement, how's your now bucket of money looking? So that cash, that paycheck that you had while you're working, have you been able to replace that? Do you have that money sitting in cash or where it's liquid and available? Do you have enough to cover your income gap? So if your expenses are at say 6,000 and your fixed income from Social Security or pensions at 4, have you covered that income gap for the year of $2,000 a month, which would be like $24,000. Do you have any big expenses planned? Any big trips? So some people are getting a little more aggressive in terms of taking vacations and trips coming out of the pandemic. Do you have anything there? Or I sat down with a client who last year she just got had all kinds of house issues that she had to kind of spend some extra money on. And just make sure you have an adequate emergency fund. Okay, things are still a little shaky in terms of the economy and everything like that, and with inflation, make sure you have a good emergency fund. From an investment standpoint, probably we're still in this era of volatility. We did take the big hit at the beginning of last year. We haven't obviously recovered. It's been trending up, but it's been continued volatility. And a lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of the research points that we're going to have this continued volatility, even though things should be trending up unless there's another big event until the presidential election. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So if you're risk adverse, have you considered kind of principal protection options? Some people have a lot of money sitting in cash or savings. Unfortunately, inflation's kind of eating that away. So some alternatives to that, and we've talked about this before, would be things like I-bonds. Now there's limitations on how much you can put in there. A good alternative right now, especially with interest rates, are treasury bills, T-bills, where you can get a good 3 to 4%, 4.5% rate of return on a 6 months to 1 year treasury bill. So that's something that we've been working on with a lot of clients. And then if you're looking more longer term, things like fixed index annuities or IULs, those are offering a greater than 4.5% rate of return, just even a fixed rate. And then if you're on the flip side and you're more aggressive in terms of your risk profile, now might be the time to buy if you understand that, hey, the next year is going to be a little bit volatile. Maybe we should be moving more into equities, looking at the fact that equities probably will recover quicker and better than bonds will in terms of just overall rate of return, with the idea that we're kind of buying the dip, so to speak. So in terms of investments, it really depends on how risk adverse you are. So if you're looking for more protection, then things like I-bonds, T-bills, especially short term, even if we're looking at just 6 months to a year, kind of just, hey, let's get a 4% rate of return and then see where things are in a year. That's making a lot of options, may make a lot of sense. More long term could be things like fixed index annuities, IUL, which also offers that principal protection. And then if you're looking more aggressive, then maybe we should kind of buy the dip and look at equities as a longer term position, just understanding that the next year might be a little volatile. Some of our clients, we're kind of taking a bucket approach of saying, okay, let's put whatever we think we might need next year, let's put that in something safe like T-bills, and then the rest can go into more equity-based portfolio. Taxes, I think taxes are still one of the biggest risks and biggest opportunities right now. With the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expiring in 2025, meaning taxes are going across the board are going up in 2026. So again, we've talked about this. What's the IRA 401k exit strategy? I'd rather pay, say, a 22% tax now than a 25 or 28% tax in 2026. Plus, we're $31 trillion in debt. Should we get more aggressive in terms of pulling money out of those 401ks, IRAs? And then healthcare, long-term care costs are skyrocketing, especially since the pandemic. Okay. especially since the pandemic, we've almost seen like some of the cost of these things almost double, where like probably 2015, 16, like an average nursing home might cost about $8,000 a month versus now $14,000 to $14,500 a month isn't out of the ballpark. So what's the plan for long-term care? And there's different strategies. I'm not just suggesting pure traditional long-term care insurance. There's other options, such as asset protection trusts or asset-based long-term care strategies, things like that. And then just legacy planning and estate planning. There hasn't been any big changes in the law in terms of estate planning per se. The biggest thing would be the 2020 Secure Act that really talks about how we leave those 401ks, IRAs to the next generation. If your estate plan was older than that, there may be some things that have to be changed depending on how the trust was created. If you're one of our clients, we kind of baked in language so that it isn't affected by the change of the Secure Act, but not all trusts or estate plans have that language in there. So if it is older than 2020 and we didn't do it, it probably should be reviewed based on that change in the Secure Act. Or beneficiaries, have you bought any new pieces of real estate, opened up a new business, a LLC? Those are all things that maybe we need to take a look at. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of planning for 2023. Just running through some of the things that we're talking to our clients about. So, all right, let me answer a few more questions that just came in. I just read an article that says the Labor Department has changed the rules so that companies who manage retirement funds no longer to act as a fiduciary or in our best interest when making investments. Yeah, your 401ks and IRAs, like you don't have a fiduciary. Whoever you're talking to, they're just a plan administrator. So unless through like the licensing of a person that you've been assigned, they're not a fiduciary for you. Like you're basically picking your own investments of whatever is inside of that, whatever that plan administrator allows inside of their sponsored plan. And a lot of times it's, and if you send me the article, I can take a look at it, see what they're actually talking about. But yeah, typically your employer sponsored plan, like a 401k or 403b, a lot of the companies actually pay money, so the company is getting a kickback to have those like the target fund 2025 or whatever, to have that funds to be available inside of that 401k or employer sponsored plan. That's why a lot of people roll it out to an IRA, because then you have the whole investing world in front of you versus just whatever the plan sponsor allowed inside of their plan. Especially like the ones tied to insurance companies, like not to pick on any specific one, but like Nationwide, client just had Nationwide plan, like they're not fiduciaries. Prudential, like they're not a fiduciary, or a Principal, they're not fiduciaries. So I'm not sure what that article was getting at, but if you email it over, I can take a look and see what's going on there. There was a fiduciary rule that was passed that said rolling money out of a 401k, there's basically now a fiduciary standard on that, but really it's just more paperwork. It really doesn't do anything. Not to get political, I find a lot of regulations, like over-regulation is just like more paperwork that people have to sign. Like a mortgage, it's like just all that paperwork. All right, one more question here. Planning personal transportation vehicles, current 3-year lease was $299, same vehicle. Oh goodness. Yeah, it's talking about just the interest rate increases. Current 3-year lease was $292 per month, same vehicle. 2023 is $460 a month. So keeping the current vehicle due to the interest rate increases. Yeah, so with the interest rate increases, there are some opportunities, and but yeah, it's an interesting time with all of that. All right, so we had a good number of people on here today, and some familiar names, so it's great to see everyone in 2023. Hope 2023 is a healthy year, a great year for everyone. Hopefully the markets rebound. I think it'll be an interesting year, a transition year as we move into 2024. I think the presidential election, that'll be an interesting time as well to see how things are going there. But with that, I want to thank everyone.